and welcome to the Artlife YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you some awesome tips to use watercolours. We're going to talk about the 4 seasons and we might create something that looks like this. So the aim of today is to create a series of 4 miniature artworks. We're going to create a watercolour background and then we're going to create more detail using oil pastels over the top. It's a fantastic lesson if you're teaching young kids all about the seasons and the type of colours that are around us during the seasons. You might be able to tell it is winter where I am right now, and so this one is definitely relevant for me right now. However, we will look into summer, spring and autumn. So get your watercolours ready and we'll have a go at creating an artwork like this one. So the first thing I've done for this task is prepare my watercolour paper. So I've just cut my watercolour paper into 4/4 long ways. So I have a nice clean strip. I'm creating 4 different seasons, so 4 different pieces of paper. And I'm also bordering each piece with some masking tape. This is just an optional extra. It just keeps your artwork nice and flat because it is tricky working with such a small piece of paper, but it also finishes it off really nicely when you're able to take away the tape. Gives it a nice clean edge. Today, obviously you can use whatever watercolors you have at home. I want to show you what I'm using today just to be able to give you a really good idea of what products are out there and what type of effect you're going to get with each of them. So this palette here is a Micador palette. It's got lots of different shades. It's fantastic. It's obviously very well loved. And I love this one because you get different versions of a color. There's a dark pink and a light pink and a reddy pink and a bluey pink. So there's so many different versions of the one color that you can use. This is a fantastic starting point. Another product that's Zart stock, these are fantastic. They're poster paints, and as you can see, they're in neon fluoro colors. These are also very well loved, and the kids in class love using these because the colors are so bright. A new product they've just released are a pearlescent sort of set of watercolor paints, and they create a bit of a shimmer or metallic-y shine whenever painting with them. So I'll show you the effect of each of these 3 and maybe you can choose which ones you'd like to invest in. So on each of my pieces of paper here, I'm going to try to portray each of the 4 seasons. So we have to think of the type of colours that might be in the sky and the surrounds during each season. So look, let's start with winter because I feel like that's a fairly simple starting point. So think about the weather. It's normally fairly cold in winter. The coldest colour of all would be blue. And so I've got lots of different versions of blue here, and I'm going to use my watercolours now just to create a bit of a blue background. So I might even give myself a bit of a horizon line here. That shows me where the sky is, and I might just do a bit of a waterscape for my wintry wonderland. Don't just think because you're painting that you just have to use your paints. Using water in different ways will create different depths of colour, different kind of blending techniques, and it looks quite beautiful there. So you can see I'm just adding water now and the colours are kind of dragging down. I'm just going to use blue for my wintry sort of scene. That's why working with watercolour paper is really beneficial because it's thicker, it can handle a good amount of water. If you're working with normal paper, generally the paper will just absorb the water and not allow you to play with the colours as much. So I do suggest investing in some watercolour paper. The one I have, it's just from Kmart, so you don't have to get the best quality watercolour paper there is. Try not to overthink this part of the task. We're literally just putting some colours down, play with the watercolour, let it absorb and blend around the section of the paper. If there's anything you don't really like, see what happens when you add water to it. So let's have a think about autumn. or fall, as it's often known as. The type of colours that come to mind for me are oranges and reds and yellows, because they're the colours that the leaves turn once it starts to get colder. So what I might do is just use those three colours to suggest an autumn sort of scene. Using these sort of bronzy pearlescent options as well, they look fantastic. Now let's get even hotter and let's think of what it's like in summer. Now summer is my favourite of all the seasons. I love spending time at the beach with my girls, my family, and we just love splashing and enjoying the summer sun. So let's paint in a nice bright sun there. I'm just using a circular sort of technique to suggest the sun. Might add in a bit of that golden pearlescent colour in there too, and then I'm going to use my water to continue on that sort of circular motion, but I'm just making my colour more watery as I bring it around, just using water now. Notice I'm just changing the direction now, just to, instead of going side to side, I'm sort of working more on a diagonal now, just to make the artworks sort of look different to one another. I'm not just using one colour, I'm using this fluoro red, I'm adding in some yellow from over here, and my fluoro orange as well. Lucky last, we're going to do spring. And when I think of spring, I just think of lush green trees and beautiful flowers and things like that. So I'm going to start with painting my background this sort of pearlescent turquoise. So I hope you know, with any of my activities that I'm creating, you know, my aim isn't to necessarily show you exactly what to do so that you want to copy it section for section. It is just to give you some tips, some tools, some inspiration, so that you can make your own artwork and adapt it in a way that suits your style, but just to inspire you and give you ideas really for creating at home. Now I'm just suggesting some flowers in the meadow here, doing this pearlescent purple, little spots like that. Wonderful. All right, well, we do need to let our seasons completely dry, and then we're going to do a tree sort of design over the top using a black pastel. You may also choose to use a black Sharpie or texture of some sort. That will also be fine, but I'm using a pastel today because it's going to be nice and bright. Right, so we've got our summer and our spring here, and the backgrounds are completely dry. Hopefully you can see the beautiful pearlescent shine that's created by the metallic watercolours. Now we're just going to use a black pastel to create some details over the top. Now, as I said before, you can use paint for this part. You can also use the watercolors as well if you would prefer to paint. But the idea now for me is just to create a tree over the top. Now, before I do that, I'm actually going to take off the border here. So it gives our artworks a really beautiful, obviously bordered effect there, but it also means that I'm going to place my tree outside of the border. And I'm just going to think of a creative sort of line. I'm literally going to do one line that looks like that. That's going to create our trunk. So we're going to make that line that little bit thicker. Now we're going to bring another line coming from the curve here. We're going to bring it to the opposite direction. Trees are tricky, but hopefully I can simplify them for you now. All right, now I'm just going to do one more line coming from there. All right, so that's sort of the basic outline of our tree. Now I'm just going to go in and draw some smaller lines. This is a great lesson, a really simple one if you're teaching seasons to young kids, talking about the colours that you might see, what the trees are doing each season, what you might see out in nature. And it's just a great way to consolidate their understanding and also use some really fun art skills as well. So try not to get too caught up on what your tree looks like. Just have a go at creating some neat lines as best you can. Yeah, we're going to repeat this process, but just have a go at creating some different style trees for each of our seasons. The idea is to not make the trees look exactly the same, so we do want to change it up and make them differ. So that might mean adding lines in different directions, that might mean adding different amount of lines, might change the thickness up a little bit. I'm just dabbing some spots onto the branches that I've created for my spring tree here to create a bit of a cherry blossom idea. You could choose to do green if you wanted it to be a leafy green tree. But these spots just suggest some flowers, essentially, or some leaves in the tree. Spot, 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 spot. A couple on the floor too. I'm going to repeat that process for the autumn tree, however I'm going to use autumn sort of colours. And obviously put some on the floor too. So really we're just suggesting leaves on the tree. We're not being too particular about drawing each individual leaf perfectly. The spots are sort of just making a suggestion. Now I am going to leave the winter one bare because most of the time the leaves would have fallen off in the dead of winter, but in the summer one I'm going to add some leaves for that one too. There. The 4 seasons in a beautiful watercolour artwork. Which one's your favourite? So it's as simple as that. I hope you've been able to create 4 miniature artworks today that work really well together and tell a bit of a story. I hope you've been able to blend some watercolours, use different types of watercolours, and then add some details over the top with some pastels to create some really beautiful trees. Please make sure that you give me a thumbs up and subscribe below if you like the video, because I will be posting many more in the future. Please also don't forget to click on my face, because you'll notice I have posted many other videos for you to enjoy to get crafty at home, including heaps of other watercolour techniques for you to learn. Thanks again for joining me here at Artlife. Take it easy.